Coming up,
You've got 24 hours. If you're not out of here, the stock's going to get burnt down.
the dangerous battle to control
Who is now running the show?
Kaz Hamad has got the market cornered.
Australia's $5 billion illegal tobacco industry.
It does end in extreme violence and murder.
And when will it stop?
It's so entrenched now, this problem.
That's next on 60 Minutes. Where there's smoke, there's firebombing. That's now the reality for tobacconists, predominantly in Victoria, but increasingly elsewhere around the country too. In the last 18 months, as many as 200 of their shops have been destroyed, as criminals try to wrest control of the very lucrative illegal tobacco market. What's concerning, though, is not only the level of violence, but why this thuggery started in the first place. By taxing cigarettes so exorbitantly in an attempt to stop people smoking, what the government has inadvertently created is a thriving black market worth $5 billion a year.
Listen, Rob, I'm going to tell you something right now. We're right because we're down from Melbourne.
You're watching something very untoward happening. What police say is a brazen daylight extortion attempt in regional Victoria.
Come here, I go to the shop.
The man issuing demands may be softly spoken, but his tactics are menacing and unmerciful.
You've got 24 hours. If you're not out of here, the stock's going to get burnt down.
According to detectives, this is now regular business in the state's tobacco wars.
So you've got to give me the keys and close down the shop right now.
The owner refused the demands. Days later, their shop was torched.
A raging inferno.
Just one of hundreds of businesses firebombed in the last 2 years.
The glass doors blown out.
And there's one reason for that.
Out of the 1,300 tobacco shops in the state of Victoria, we suspect that the vast majority are selling illicit tobacco.
With taxes pushing legal tobacco prices through the roof, criminals are now fighting for control of the lucrative illicit tobacco trade.
Innocent people will be killed and more will be killed because we've got hitmen running around trying to kill targets.
Tonight, the driving forces behind this bloody gangland conflict and the syndicates calling the shots. Nowadays, running a store that sells tobacco is a dangerous business. If you do, you'll likely be in the crosshairs of one of 3 major crime syndicates. Leading the charge is this thug, Kazem Hamad, a man now considered the most dangerous gangster targeting Australia.
He's very wealthy and he's very ruthless. So he has no shortage of soldiers who will do anything from steal a car, burn a tobacco shop, to shoot someone dead.
Legendary crime reporter John Sylvester has been covering Melbourne's gangland for decades. But he believes Kazem Hamad heralds a new era for organised crime in the country.
He has exploited the government's inability to control an industry. And so what's happened here is the government has hit smokers so hard with taxes that they have sought another avenue, which is black market tobacco, of which our man is the king of the kids.
The king of the kids is a hell of an expression. Why has Kaz Hamad been able to have such control over other violent men?
Well, Kaz may well have invented the perfect organised crime model. So what he's got is he now controls the actual production of a certain cigarette brand. So he produces it and gets his profit there. He smuggles it into Australia, he distributes it, he then gets to the retail end of the market and then rips them off as well, demanding protection money.
From the farm gate to the consumer's mouth, if you will.
He's got the lot. And added to that, he is now overseas, so he's effectively built a moat around the castle.
In a seeming failure of our justice system, Kazem Hamad built his crime empire while locked inside a Melbourne prison. He'd spent nearly a decade in jail for drug trafficking and used his time there to plot and scheme. When Hamad was released in July 2023, he was deported back to his native Iraq. But the move backfired spectacularly because it put him out of reach from our authorities. From his base in the Middle East, he continued to assert his dominance over the illicit tobacco trade, allegedly masterminding countless violent crimes, including scores of firebombings. If Victoria Police could get their hands on Hamad, they'd surely ask him about one of his biggest rivals in the tobacco wars, Sulaiman Abdul Rahim, also known as the Punisher.
Well, the Punisher lived in denial, having been shot so many times and survived. The police call them cockroaches because you can't kill them.
I'm still alive, but 8 shots later, I'm still alive. You're lucky.
For months, Hamad and the Punisher mocked each other, as this phone call between the two gangland figures reveals. The Punisher had also gloated on podcasts and social media about previous failed attempts on his life.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
and shot in the eye.
But with $1 million bounty on his head, many believed Abdul Rahim was a dead man walking.
With walking around worried, you know, when my time's up, I guess.
The Melbourne's most hunted man executed in a brutal gangland hit.
The murder of the Punisher is almost certainly fallout from the tobacco wars. And through his ruthless campaign of violence and standover, Kazim Hamad is now the undisputed king of Australia's illegal tobacco trade.
Well, there's all sorts of violence going on in the market at the moment.
Former Australian Federal Police Detective Superintendent Rowan Pike knows more about the history of the illicit tobacco trade than almost anyone else. In 2015, he created and led the Australian Border Force's Tobacco Task Force.
What did you learn about who was pulling the strings behind this trade?
Primarily it was large Middle Eastern groups.
Middle Eastern organised crime.
Certainly here in Melbourne, and that their tentacles stretched out beyond the Victorian border, certainly into South Australia and New South Wales.
In its infancy, before Kazim Hamad got his violent hooks into it, the illegal tobacco trade was a relatively safe affair, ruled unchallenged by the Hegarty syndicate.
They flew under the radar, and because it was a newish and growing crime type, they were largely left alone by law enforcement.
How easy was it for the Hegartys to make big bucks?
Oh, it was incredibly easy back then. There were few laws that really addressed the issue. Once these products were past the border, then there was really no one domestically who was capable and resourced to address the distribution of the illicit product.
But without proper enforcement, syndicates went to war to control a trade worth almost $5 billion a year. That's $13 million a day.
Who is now running the show?
Well, the Hegartys are still believed to be part of it. Kaz Hamad's obviously been involved, and 2 brothers from Altona here in Melbourne who my team actually arrested 10 years ago, the Dib and Hassan Barakat. They're believed to be large players in the market as well.
The Barakats are the 3rd major tobacco smuggling group in the market. And proving that point, on the very day this interview was taking place, a few kilometres away, another gang was spraying their house with bullets.
Tell me about the Barakat brothers.
We caught them importing via air freight millions of cigarettes. They were charged, convicted, sent to jail for only a year or 2. Once they got out, they obviously have continued their trade, and they're now believed to be very large players in it.
The lack of meaningful punishment for those operating in the illegal tobacco trade has helped create the boom in both the black market and in violence. Like Kazim Hamad, the Barakats were released from jail, only to continue operations more successfully than before, highlighting an incredible policy failure at frustrated police are now calling out.
Look, there's a number of factors that have fueled the current environment. The absence of a licensing scheme here in Victoria is certainly one of those, the absence of an effective enforcement regime.
Detective Superintendent Jason Kelly is the head of Victoria's Anti-Gangs Division. He says the increase in the tax applied to tobacco has inflamed the problem.
The gap between the illicit product and the legitimate product is there is a fairly significant gap, and serious and organised crime have leveraged off the fact that they can import illicit tobacco and pay minimal amounts of money which competes then, of course, with legitimate packs of cigarettes and tobacco.
Why are these syndicates moving away from drugs to illicit tobacco?
Historically, organised crime has seen it as a low-risk, high-reward environment. The penalties of being caught with illicit tobacco or vapes probably weren't where they needed to be.
It's virtually impossible to stop, and perhaps we should be looking at other ways to turn off the tap instead of just mopping up the mess at the end.
And as you'll see, it's a mess that is leaving innocent lives at risk and pushing legitimate business owners to the brink.
I am terrified to speak out against this, absolutely terrified. It has taken years for me to build the courage to speak out about it publicly, and I feel that the end is near anyway.
Victoria is in the grip of the most explosive gangland war Australia has ever seen, with increasing firebombings, standover tactics, and the recent murder of an innocent woman, Katie Tangi, after an arsonist torched the wrong house.
An innocent young woman trapped inside.
The tragic death was, according to veteran crime reporter John Sylvester, totally avoidable.
Anyone with a brain knew this was going to happen because we have a legal product in tobacco and we have smokers who are sick of paying so much tax. So naturally they look for an alternative, which is the illicit tobacco. The government has done that.
You say the problem was entirely foreseeable. Where does responsibility lie?
Multi-levels. Like, for example, putting heavy tax on smoking was done for two quite legitimate reasons. Raise revenue and secondly, discourage people from smoking. So governments and authorities would look and go, wow, our excise is down. That means people aren't smoking. But if you go and look at the wastewater analysis, the nicotine is still there. The idea that smoking has dropped dramatically, that's sullied by the fact that many smokers are now getting their product from illicit sources.
That black market has created an all-out gang war in Victoria, a conflict that is now spreading across state lines and leaving a trail of destruction and death in its wake.
Officers from the state's tobacco task force diving into Adelaide's underbelly.
With authorities having booted Kazim Hamid, the biggest player in the conflict, from the country, he's now calling the shots with impunity from his hideout overseas, seemingly beyond the reach of Australian authorities, like Detective Superintendent Jason Kelly.
Is it frustrating for someone like you, a senior police officer, having someone like Kaz Hamid safe and sound in Iraq, running a huge criminal business here in Victoria?
Historically, a decade or so ago, organised crime was very a localised state or national issue. Now, organised crime, you can be offshore anywhere in the world with encrypted devices, conducting your business.
How are these offshore crime bosses commissioning arsons, shootings, even murder?
One of the trends in recent times is this air tasking by organised crime. People are picking up those tasks and committing crimes for as little as $500 or $1,000. And some of the people that we've apprehended from as young as 14 years of age.
Sorry, you said there was people as young as 14 being commissioned to do these crimes?
Correct. So we have had a number of arsons committed here in Victoria by youth or children who have taken that job and executed those arsons.
I am terrified to speak out against this, absolutely terrified. It has taken years for me to build the courage to speak out about it publicly.
Sam is a convenience store owner who refuses to sell illegal tobacco. And that's made her a target for the gangs. So we've had to protect her identity.
We want this tobacco wars to stop because of the fear in the community. I'm sick of driving past firebombed buildings and having to look at old buildings falling down in my area because of the amount of firebombings that has happened. I can't believe that government and everyone that's involved in this is just simply allowing it to happen.
Sam and her family have been pushed to the brink by the illicit tobacco trade, driven from their hometown by gangsters.
I was terrified. It's difficult to prepare yourself to go to work knowing that people want you to lose your business in a very violent way as being firebombed. To have men, especially if I'm standing behind the counter by myself, to scream extreme abuse of a sexual nature is terrifying.
We have been targeted all around the country by violent attacks with the use of edged weapons, machetes, scissors, hammers, that type of thing.
Theo Fakare is the CEO of the Australian Association of Convenience Stores, and he says the economics of legal versus illegal cigarettes has pushed consumers to the black market.
You can buy an illegal pack of tobacco for as little as $9, and a legal pack could be somewhere between $40 and $45. The gap that exists is just too lucrative. There's limited enforcement. The reward is big, but the penalty's low. And they continue to get away with it whilst the governments aren't using the full force of the law and actually taking this seriously.
What policy changes could be made to make an impact now?
So as a priority, we would call on any government to firstly put a halt on any future excise increases as a bare minimum.
Again, you can understand why people might be utterly cynical at you calling for a tax cut to help your members.
Keeping taxes high, in our opinion, is only a gift to the black market. Anytime the price goes up, the black market operators will be clapping their hands. It's like a tidal wave. We have more availability today of illegal tobacco and illegal vaping products than we've ever had. We've got more enforcement than we've ever had, and government revenue continues to decline at the fastest rate it's ever been. So something isn't working here.
It's a grievance echoed by the former leader of the Border Force Tobacco Task Force, Rowan Pike, who now advises the retail sector. He says that federal and state authorities failed to respond to his warnings nearly a decade ago.
I warned the ABF, and then once leaving the ABF warned the federal parliament in an inquiry that this was a huge problem, a $1 billion problem, and growing exponentially. And I warned them that organised crime was involved, and of course funding organised crime would lead to further crime.
What was the response?
There was denial. It was inconvenient for them to admit that there was an illicit problem.
Rowan then discovered the manufacturer of one of the biggest illicit brands of tobacco, Double Happiness, was seemingly being allowed by Beijing to smuggle its product into Australia.
Do you think the Chinese government was giving the Double Happiness brand a free pass?
It would be hard for the Chinese government not to have known the extent of the illegality, but I certainly notified the Chinese authorities of the recent illegality, and it still continues to this day.
You say you notified the Chinese authorities. What did you do?
The Chinese Commissioner of Customs just happened to be in Australia when we were investigating this problem, and I briefed him in Double Happiness and how some of that product was arriving in Australia.
What did he say?
He said that he would establish a committee with the Hong Kong Customs Commissioner and that I should go to Hong Kong and brief that meeting.
Did that happen?
No.
Did the Chinese authorities do anything?
I can't say. I was prevented from going to that meeting and briefing them further on the issue.
Who prevented you?
The ABF.
Why?
I can only assume that was due to political sensitivities.
Geopolitics?
Yes.
Has the Double Happiness trade dampened since then?
No, it's only strengthened since then.
With Beijing apparently happy to look the other way, Australian authorities are still scrambling. Middle Eastern organised crime and outlaw bikie gangs are clearly winning the battle. So what needs to be done to stop it?
Given that excise rates are the primary driver of this problem from the start, we should be looking at reducing the excise rates to a level that doesn't encourage people to go to the illicit market.
You may be accused of pumping up the interests of big tobacco in proposing that the taxing of big tobacco be reassessed.
I have some sympathy for Big Tobacco. They're a legal company trying to sell legal products, and they're
Products that kill people.
products that kill people, certainly. And I've also got sympathy for state law enforcement who have been handed this hospital hand pass by the federal government.
You say the Federal Health Department, then its actions have actually fuelled organised crime?
Certainly. The Federal Health Department, with their ideological zealotry in relation to illicit tobacco, has caused the problem, continues to fuel it. Their policies are being detrimental to Australia each and every day.
It's an over-the-top accusation by you, isn't it? The Health Department's simply trying to protect the health of Australians.
They're doing the exact opposite. They've actually caused a market whereby smokers can access a really cheap product. So it's actually encouraging people to smoke by having $10, $12 packets of cigarettes in the marketplace that are easily accessible.
It's a dirty habit that, combined with successive policy failures, has created a lucrative and now very bloody black market, leaving law enforcement officers like Jason Kelly at Victoria Police to try to mop up the mess.
Will there be more fires?
I cannot sit here confidently say there won't be.
Will there be more shootings?
Similar to the previous answer, Nick, I can't sit here and say there won't be.
Will there be more murders?
I certainly hope not. But we have had a number of homicides now that we can say are linked to the illicit tobacco trade.
To their credit, federal authorities have been ramping up their pursuit of the illegal tobacco kingpins, and Victoria has finally moved to introduce a licensing scheme, albeit one police say is too little, too late. Hello, I'm Nick McKenzie. Thanks for watching 60 Minutes Australia. Subscribe to our channel now for brand new stories and exclusive clips every week. And don't miss out on our extra minutes segments and full episodes of 60 Minutes on 9now.com.au and the 9Now app.